The 30 Years' War had already continued for 27 years and took the lives of millions, but millions more would die to sate the appetites of the kings, and not every general cares about their soldiers. The Holy Roman Empire is being pushed back by the Franco-Swedish alliance. It seems that it's on the brink and its best general is now dead. The Battle of Zusmarshausen in the heart of Bavaria will be pivotal. In our opinion, learning new stuff and developing yourself is an essential part of being a human. In our fast-paced world, it's often difficult to find enough time though, as our work and social lives and hobbies take most of our time. It's natural to think that you don't have enough time to read a book, but the sponsor of this video, Blinkist, is here to help you with that problem. This is a unique app that takes the most important insights, new developments and know-how from thousands of non-fiction books, condensing them into a 15-minute long read or listen. As we have to work almost 24/7 to produce our videos, Blinkist is essential for our personal growth. If you're interested in the history of the 30 Years' War, you need to listen to Martin Luther by Heinz Schilling, as it describes the start of the Reformation, while Civilizations by the classicist Mary Beard would be interesting to all fans of history. The first 100 people to go to blinkist.com/kingsandgenerals are going to get unlimited access for 1 week to try it out. You'll also get 25% off if you want the full membership. In the aftermath of the Second Battle of Nordlingen on August 3, 1645, the Bavarians retreated southeast, while the battered French took Nordlingen and 2 weeks later Dinkelsbühl. Their commander Condé was afflicted with dysentery and immediately left for France, leaving Turenne in command of 12,000 troops. The latter decided to gather provisions to the north. Meanwhile, the Bavarian army was now under the command of Gellin, who was released from French captivity in exchange for Grammont. To the north, Swedish commander in Westphalia, Königsmark, marched towards Saxony and united his forces with those under Axel Lilly sent from Sweden. His united army was strong enough to force the Elector of Saxony, Johann Georg, to sign a separate treaty and leave the alliance with Emperor Ferdinand III. Königsmark then started moving to reinforce Torstensson. On the Bohemian front, Torstensson was seemingly defeated, but as usual, he put his energy to good use and drew from his garrisons, getting his army to more than 14,000 troops. Still, his enemies had around 30,000. Despite that, he surprised Archduke Leopold by appearing directly to his east at Mistelbach on August 28th. As this move threatened Vienna, the Austrians had to leave their position around Morava and retire beyond the Danube. This technically opened up the route for the 30,000 Transylvanians of Georgi I Rákóczi to join Torstensson in his attack on Vienna, but another major player joined the game. The Ottoman Sultan Ibrahim had just started the Cretan War against the Venetians and didn't want the Habsburgs to attack his realm, so he rescinded all support he was giving to Rákóczi and forced him to sign a treaty with the emperor. The Transylvanians retreated from modern Slovakia and, left with no help, Torstensson had to abandon his position around the Danube and move to northwestern Bohemia. The Swedes would not get this close to Vienna ever again, while Torstensson, whose health deteriorated, resigned his post, handing the army to Gustav Wrangel. The end of the Swedish threat against Vienna allowed Leopold to move to bolster Gellin, and by October 5th, the Bavarians had 18,000 troops. Soon they started their advance against Turenne, who had no choice but to evacuate to Philipsburg. Hot on his heels, the Bavarians cancelled most of the French gains of 1645. Despite that and Torstensson's failure to take Vienna, the defeats at Jankau and Nordlingen, as well as the separate peace signed by Saxony, had demoralized the Imperials, and the Emperor sent orders to his diplomats in Osnabrück and Münster to accelerate the negotiations with the Swedes and French. The latter were still asking for too much, making peace impossible at the moment. The Imperials considered Bohemia to be crucial for the defense of Vienna, so in early 1646, their main army under Gallus was concentrated on this front, and were able to expel the remaining Swedish garrisons in Bohemia by early March. These small groups joined Königsmark in South Saxony, creating parity on the front. Neither Königsmark nor Gallus were eager to take a rash action, so nothing of note happened here in 1646. Meanwhile, the goal of the French in 1646 was to knock Bavaria out of the war, but the chief minister of France, Cardinal Mazarin, was sure that he could achieve that through diplomacy, so Turenne was ordered to not advance. The French and Bavarians were negotiating separate peace, but the progress of the Swedish army under Wraniel against Leopold once again changed the situation. In June, the Swedes were near Hanau in Hesse, and the imperial commander asked for Bavarian assistance. As Gellin reinforced Leopold, Turenne decided that the negotiations had failed and joined the Swedes, who were falling back from Leopold at Wetzlar on August 10th. Their united armies were too strong for the Imperials, forcing the Archduke to start a slow retreat with a number of rearguard actions. This didn't stop the Allies from taking Aschaffenburg on August 21st and then Nordlingen on September 8th. The Imperials were then pushed across the Danube, and Rhine fell to the Franco-Swedish army on September 21st. As Wirth was at Augsburg, showed readiness to defend, the Allies turned against Landsberg and took it. The beginning of winter halted the Franco-Swedish advance, but Bavaria was devastated, and the fall of Landsberg opened the route to Munich, so the outraged Elector of Bavaria, Maximilian I, restarted negotiations with Mazarin, and on March 14, 1647, signed the Truce of Ulm, unilaterally abandoning the war. This forced the emperor to hasten his own diplomatic efforts, and it seems that he was able to persuade his cousin, the King of Spain, to become more active on the Flanders front. The Spanish commander in the area, de Beck, moved his troops to Luxembourg, possibly threatening the French conquests in the Holy Roman Empire. Turenne was ordered to move to Flanders to prevent that from happening. Turenne's march north wasn't without problems. The Weimarian troops who had fought for Turenne for years now were unhappy about the salary situation and thought that they had been discriminated against by the French officers. When they learned that the army was leaving Germany, they mutinied. The French and Weimarians actually started fighting until Turenne decided to leave them alone, and they left his army to join the Swedes. This left the French commander weakened, and he failed to conquer Luxembourg. On the other hand, Condé also became active in Flanders, which prompted the Spanish to ask for imperial help, and the Archduke was sent to reinforce this front. The Swedes weren't faring much better. Initially, Wraniel was able to enter the western part of Austria and took Bregenz, which was considered safe before, and therefore contained the riches of many imperial nobles. Wraniel was planning to launch an attack on Vienna, but the area was mountainous, and the new imperial commander, Melander, proved to be energetic and blocked his advance. After not being able to defeat Melander, Wraniel changed his plan. In spring and summer, he moved to Hesse and then Thuringia to attack Austria via Bohemia, but Melander was able to follow every move of his foe. On August 19th, the Swedes attempted to break into the Bohemian heartland to the west of Pilsen, but were stopped with minor casualties. Wraniel was then ordered to draw Melander away, and he did just that by moving north. Both armies moved to winter quarters in Westphalia and Hesse. Simultaneously, events were transpiring in Bavaria. Maximilian's officers were enraged by his betrayal of the Catholic cause, and a group of them, led by Wirth, mutinied. The loyal forces were able to defeat the mutineers, but the latter just escaped to Austria and joined the emperor's service. Still, the Catholics were resentful, and when Mazarin demanded more concessions in the aftermath of the mutiny, Maximilian terminated the truce with France and rejoined the Imperial Alliance in September. With the resumption of Bavarian participation in 1648, Grunsfeld was appointed the leader of the Electorate's army, so Melander, who had a hard time feeding his troops in Hesse, fell back to Nuremberg, where the Bavarians joined him, bringing their total to 24,000 men. Using the imperial retreat, Vraniel started advancing south in February and was soon reinforced by Königsmark. The Swedes now had around 22,000 soldiers, and by March 13th, occupied the area around Würzburg. Turenne was finally allowed to cross the Rhine, and in March his 9,000 took a position at Aschaffenburg. On the 18th, the Allies linked up near Dinkelsbühl. In response, Mailander left Ingolstadt and started moving towards Lech, leaving garrisons to defend Donauwörth and Lauingen. However, the former fell by the end of the month, and the Allies gained a crossing across the Danube. At this point, Turenne and Vraniel started arguing what their next move should be. Turenne wanted to march southwest to secure more lands for his country and knock Bavaria out of the war again. However, the Swedish commander was eager to retake Bohemia. In the end, they reached a consensus. The Swedes would take the Upper Palatinate, and then both armies would attack Swabia. To that end, Turenne moved to Ansbach, while Vraniel attacked Neumarkt and Königsmark, Amberg. The Imperials answered with a march to Regensburg. They weren't able to stop the fall of Neumarkt in early April, but stopped Königsmark from taking Amberg and then Eger. Unable to force a battle with Mailander, Vraniel rejoined Turenne on the 17th near Dinkelsbühl, which fell to their forces by the 21st. All this movement only exacerbated the supply situation of the Allies, and they were compelled to reposition to Württemberg, which was left relatively unscathed by the absence of war in the last few years. By the end of April, they were to the south of Stuttgart, while the Imperial commander left garrisons to the south of the Danube and relocated to Zusmarshausen on May 1st. Thus, Mailander's forces were dispersed around the area, meaning that he decreased the supply strain, but at the same time meant that a surprise attack could have caught him unprepared. Over the next 2 weeks, the armies raided and counter-raided with minor results. However, this was done deliberately by Turenne, who managed to cover his real advance with all the raiding. On the 16th, the Allies started traversing the Danube at Lauingen, unbeknownst to the Imperials. The Allies probably were just looking for a way to force the river and initially didn't know where Mailander was. However, upon crossing the Danube, Turenne was informed by his scouts that the main portion of the enemy troops were at Zusmarshausen, but their army was dispersed around the area. The French commander, alongside Vraniel and Königsmark, led 6,000 horsemen to engage the Imperials, ordering the rest of the army to cross the river. In total, the Allies had more than 25,000 troops. Mailander's scouts had also informed him of Turenne's advance, so on the night of the 16th, he and his 3,000 started their retreat towards the east. His army had to get through 3 passes and cross 2 rivers to reach the safety of Augsburg, and that would prove hard to do with a baggage train on difficult terrain. He ordered the Italian general Montecuccoli to cover the retreat. By 7 AM on the 7th, Turenne was at Zusmarshausen and noticed Montecuccoli's 1,500 horsemen defending the first pass. As someone who didn't appreciate Condé's frontal charges, he ordered Vraniel to use the northern bypass route to outflank the foe, but the Italian general was too cunning for that and immediately started to retreat to the second pass. Unfortunately, the rest of the Imperial army was too slow, and the baggage train was still not beyond the second pass, which forced Montecuccoli to stop and fight. However, his 1,500 were no match for Turenne's 3,000, and he was pushed back with losses in the direction of the third pass. It was now 9 AM, and Turenne was reinforced by 1,000 horsemen. Montecuccoli attempted to stop the Allies at the entry of the third pass, using 800 musketeers and 4 guns in the first echelon, and his horsemen in the second. As they didn't have time to properly set up, the French leader ordered 3/4 of his army to charge directly, while Vraniel was sent to envelop the enemy from the south. At first, the Allied attack was successful, and they pushed the musketeers into the second echelon, but then Mailander was bolstered by 1,000 or so troops and joined the fray, which halted Turenne's breakthrough. For some time, the sides were evenly matched, but then Vraniel appeared in the Imperial rear. His attack finally broke Mailander's lines. The Imperial commander was killed, while Montecuccoli was able to escape with a few hundred others. The Allied casualties were light, while the Imperials lost almost 3,000 troops and hundreds of baggage carts, which probably was even more detrimental than any manpower losses. By that point, more Allied troops were in the area, and Turenne decided to push and take the strategically crucial Augsburg, but Grunsfeld arrived on the scene with 2,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, and 30 guns. Turenne had just 6 guns, and in the ensuing artillery duel, the Allies suffered casualties. Grunsfeld then ordered the best of his cavalry to attack and push back his foe. This attack succeeded, and the Allied forces had to retreat beyond the third pass. Using this, Grunsfeld moved his troops across the river. Despite this minor success, Grunsfeld was still heavily outnumbered. Thankfully for him, the Allies had no desire to cross the Lech via a narrow passage and started moving north towards Oberndorf. Königsmark and 2,000 men were sent to attack Bohemia. Turenne's somewhat slow movement allowed the Bavarian commander to gather almost 15,000 troops, and although he was outnumbered by 23,000 allies, he only had to defend the crossing. The two armies almost copied the same positions Gustavus Adolphus and Thiel held 15 years before during the First Battle of Lech. To prevent the enemy from forcing the river, the Bavarians built a sconce on its eastern bank. Unlike Thiel, who had most of his infantry near the bank, which allowed the Swedes to destroy their formation, Grunsfeld kept most of his 8,000 footmen further back, planning to counterattack the Allies when they attempted to cross. This was a good plan that required precise timing. The Allies spent the 26th of May preparing for the battle. 12 heavy guns were raised to bombard the Bavarians, and a portable bridge was built. The cannon fire didn't do much damage, as Grunsfeld's troops were out of range, so the Allies decided to cross on the 27th. A few cavalry units were ordered to force the river on a number of occasions to act as scouts. The Bavarian patrols noticed some of them and came to the conclusion that the enemy was on the east side of the river. When Grunsfeld was told about this, he abandoned his excellent position and started fleeing. Turenne didn't know about that, and on the 27th began the crossing. A few more cavalry squadrons were sent forth to find where the Imperials were. They bypassed Rhine and engaged the retreating foe. This only sped up Grunsfeld's retreat, and a number of cannons were captured by the Allies. The bridge across was dropped, but at first the defenders of the sconce and the garrison of Rhine managed to set it on fire. Despite their valiant efforts, Turenne's troops soon pushed them back and started crossing. With most of their army on the right side, the Allies attacked and raised rain in a vicious manner, probably hoping to scare Bavaria into submission. Desperately outnumbered, Grunsfeld continued to retreat, but on June 3rd was relieved of command due to this and replaced with Hunoltstein. The new commander retreated beyond the Isar River and used the garrisons to get his army to 15,000 troops. The Allies, who left a garrison at Rhine, now had around 22,000, and their decisive advantage in mounted troops meant that the Bavarians had to keep the river crossings to prevent the rest of the electorate from falling to the enemy. Mazarin continued negotiations with Maximilian, so Turenne was ordered not to attack Munich directly to prevent the elector from backing off from the peace talks. The Allies marched for Freising. On June 3rd, the city fell, opening the path across the river. The Allies continued with a siege and conquest of Landshut, while the Bavarians fell behind the river Inn. Thankfully for the latter, in June they were reinforced by Piccolomini, sent by the Emperor, bringing the number of their troops to 24,000. Not willing to fight the fresh troops, the Allies retreated north beyond the Isar. The two sides wrestled between two rivers for a few more months, fighting in a number of skirmishes, but the armies were exhausted and finding provisions was becoming a bigger problem, so the action on this front stalled. Ironically, the fate of the war that took more than 5 million German lives would not be decided in Germany but on other fronts. We will conclude our series on the 30 Years' War next time with the battles of Linz and Prague and the details of the Westphalian Peace, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.